Hello and welcome to Stammer On with me, John. It's been a little while since I've said that live. Last couple of weeks haven't done a live show. I think pretty much the numbers speak for themselves, and I think that while it's really important to talk about stammering and keep stuttering in the public eye and always keep it up. I think I do think the appetite really isn't there for it. So as much as I'd love to continue to do this kind of everyday shows, I think pretty much the numbers speak for themselves. So I don't want to necessarily keep banging the drum every single day on a subject matter that has limited scope. Stuttering is obviously really important to me, and if you've never been here before, this is what primarily the channel was set up to do. So we're talking about everything to do with somebody who has a stammer. Stammer on really comes from my journey of having a stutter, having a stammer, and doing that over a number of years. Doing that over a number of years obviously has an impact. I am what you call a covert stammerer. So what that means is that it's my job to convince you that I don't stammer, which seems like a ridiculous notion, because what it means is that there is not only the stigma, I do believe there is a stigma still attached, a stigma of people who have a stammer is real, and what I'm trying to do really is kind of alleviate that from a person who has a stammer, and then kind of talk about that and why that's important and why we need to keep that up in the public eye. I know stammering is not always a flavor of the month, but for people like myself who have to live with it every day, it's something that's really important, I believe, that we need to talk about. So for today's show, I think is really important, and these are all things that I have experienced myself. So stuttering, anxiety, I think is a huge one, and imposter syndrome. Oh goodness me, I'm sorry, I'm so tired. And then we're going to be talking about mental health as well. So I think from my perspective, a little bit of my history. So I have something called it's bipolar, and basically that feeds into depression, that feeds into a lot of different things. So that's first to say that. So bipolar is what manic depression used to be called. Mine is obviously a history of different things that cause that, and having a stammer and anxiety really doesn't help, and we can talk about that as well. I've stammered since probably I was about 6 or 7, and I've kind of something that I've only ever really known, and kind of it's become part of me. And anxiety, which I think anxiety has become a little bit of a buzzword. I think a lot of people do suffer from anxiety, and I mean real anxiety. I think people can be labelled with many things, and I do believe in this world where there are lots of different things happening with wars and whatever else, and there are lots of different things that are happening where anxiety can be caused. And imposter syndrome, I think a lot of people do suffer from this. I know I do, and we can kind of talk about that and my sort of thoughts on that as well. So really today I want to cover the stammering, which I'm an expert in, anxiety, and maybe you can tell me some of your kind of anxiety and kind of what happens to you there, and if you ever feel like an imposter. So what's it ultimately like living with a stutter? It can be the most frustrating thing in the world can also be the most liberating thing in the world. I think for the longest time, and people who do stammer, I think it really depends on your relationship with your stutter, with your stammer, and how you feel to. I know many people, many people who just want to be cured. There were many a times that I would lie awake at night, probably being a teenager, wishing that the world would swallow me up, wishing that I didn't have a stammer. I would have done anything in the entire world, probably at that point, not to have a stammer. And then that's when kind of different mental health aspects kick into it. The first thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore. I think that those are things that they start to go through your head, particularly when you're understanding the world when you're that age and you live with something that it may not seem important to some people, but when your whole life, when you're a teenager, is about how you are, how you act with your peers, and you're trying to learn about the world, is very, very, very hard. So from my perspective, I tell you what, it was a late night last night, and not in a good way either. Just having kids and it makes you tired. And then you go into your formative years and just trying to communicate, just the frustration of trying to communicate who you are as a person. You almost become and some people are not. And honestly, I have so much respect for people who stammer, so much respect for the community, so much respect for people who have just basically said, look, this is me. I stammer. I know who I am and I'm going to stammer. I don't care what you think about me. And that's how they live their life. I wish from an early age I could have been more aware of that. But I believed at that time we lived in a society, and we're going back to the late 80s, the early 90s, whereby society probably wasn't as accepting as it is now. I do believe that acceptance now is a little bit of a front at times. I believe acceptance at times is a little bit of a buzzword and something that people feel that they ultimately need to do without actually understanding what it is. So stammering is such a wide ranging thing. Stammering is a thing that impacts people at different levels. I don't know of many other disorders. I don't know of many other things that impact people from all ranges of different states. You can how the media portray people who have a stammer, I think, is disgusting. To be quite frank with you, I think how the media portrays people who stammer isn't real. I think that people who stammer in the media are always a joke. You never really get a real portrayal and real feel for who people are really. There are people behind the stammer. You only ever get the two ends of the spectrum. What you really get is you get people who stammer who are cured. Some people, and I believe that people can have their opinion on different things, and have their opinion on cure. People who stammer can be cured, or you have this other end of the scale where people who stammer can't talk. So there's this reluctance, if you like, to accept anything in the middle for people who stammer. Now, personally, for myself, to bear in mind, this is live, and I'm comfortable. This is my home. This is where I feel comfortable. I've got something over my mouth so I can talk, and I feel perfectly comfortable in talking about this stuff. There are days, there could be an event There could be days, there could be months, and I won't go through and I won't stammer at all. And I should be okay with that. I should be absolutely fine and be, this is me, and stammer away. There may be a day, there may be a week, there may be a year whereby my stammer and how fluent I am will decrease. Now, in my opinion, there's no such thing, and people can label their own stammer, people can have their opinions. In my opinion, there is no good or bad stammer, right? Because, and I mean this in the greatest respects, not saying that stammering's good or bad, but stammering is just having a stammer. How can you stammer and it be good or bad? Like, if somebody talks, do you say to them, oh, you're having a good speaking day, or you're having a bad speaking day? No, speaking is speaking. People who have a stammer speak in a particular way that's not considered functional at times. Sad to say, it's not considered normal. And that's what I mean about there's a facade up about people who accept different things. And that's why it's really, really important for people who stammer to talk about it. And it's counterintuitive, it's counterproductive at times that people need to talk about this so people understand, to get this into the media, to get this out there in people. But it's counterproductive because people don't necessarily want to talk. I think what we do bad in the stammering community is that we don't support each other enough. Personal experience, I mean, things that I do, I get very little support, feedback, not because I particularly want or need the support, but I just think that the projects that I try to do, and I'm not trying to do it for a pat on the back. I think a lot of the projects that I try to do is very limited interaction from the community. And I'm just of the opinion that I really believe that as a stammering community with lots and lots of people, we need to support each other's works, need to support each other a little bit more. But I find that we work in silo and we work in our own islands, and we don't really come together enough in a collaborative way to bring the communities together. Now, to go to kind of coincide with this, really, for me, are kind of anxiety. I'm going to put depression in there as well, when things like anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome is a really really big one for me. And I think anxiety, we can come back to that, because I think anxiety plays a major role in people who stammer, and I think anxiety does play a major role in society and the things that we do and the things that we see. And it's not just limited to people who stammer. Imposter syndrome is basically the persistent fear, and this is my opinion, and just to caveat all this is that I'm not medically trained, and these views and opinions are mine alone. And I'll always advise you that if you suffer from any of these things and you feel like you need help, then I really advise you to go in and speak to your medical professional. And this is just my opinion. I'm not here to tell you what to do. These are just my opinions based on my experience. So imposter syndrome, so this is whereby there's a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. Now, it doesn't mean that you are a fraud at all. It's basically just where that everything you do is not good enough for yourself. Everything you do feels like luck, or someone else has kind of had a hand. It's the timing of it. And I don't know about anyone else, but this is something I really suffer. I've always suffered from this. I've always felt that no matter what job I did, no matter what job I do now, that I do this, and every day I feel like a fraud. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like this is not something that I should do. When things not when things don't go my way, but when the things I do maybe don't go the way that I planned. Because YouTube, you can have your ideas, and in your mind, this is a really great idea to do, or video you make and you're passionate about it, and you want to bring that passion out, and you don't get the numbers you want or the things that you want to do. It kind of feeds into that as well. So everything I do, everything I make, there's always that imposter that sits there. Anything in life I've ever done, is I've always felt more so in in things like jobs whereby I may have done well, and I may, I know that I've worked hard, but there's always this feeling that you're always going to get found out. And I think a lot of people really suffer from that. And I think, and I don't know if it's just men, I can only speak for me. I just think it's an absolute I think it's a very underspoken about. I don't even know if that's a word. I don't think it's spoken about enough. I don't really see it spoken about enough. And I don't know if this is a hangover from me from like having a stammer, because ultimately, whether I like this or not, but for me, self-worth, um, stammering has never, for me, up until recently, has always been an acceptance piece. So stammering, or like having a stutter, has always impacted my self-worth, always impacted. I've always felt like an imposter, and then particularly when you covert as well. So I have been a covert stammerer. You are trying to fool people into thinking that you speak. So therefore, your mentality is always that trying to fool people into thinking that you are kind of what you're not, and you're always trying to do it. So it's really interesting if you've ever felt in that way, what you think about that. I would really love to know. Put that in the chat, put that wherever you like. It'd be really interesting to know that. So, which really feeds into the anxiety piece. For me, I think there is a combination. I think anxiety across the world. I think anxiety, there are different levels of anxiety. I think people are really quick on the trigger to label anxiety. And I'm not trying to dismiss anyone's views. I think that people can be anxious and think and say whatever they want to say, but I think that real anxiety is something different. If you're anxious that you've not closed the window, you're anxious that you've ordered the wrong coffee, or you're anxious that your dog might be, I don't know, in your garden, in your rubbish bins. I think that's labeled as an anxiety. And then I think there are other anxieties in life whereby, you don't know whether you're going to eat today. You don't know if your family are okay. And we could get all political in this, but there are things that are happening across the world, and you've got those real anxieties about real stuff, and that's real anxiety. That's real stress. And then you can have anxiety brought on by things like having a stammer, by the way you speak, by your self-worth. Being anxious every day can lead to stress. I mean, anxious and stressed and pressed, because that all brings it on because of the activities and the impacts of other people. And I think where this is a sort of point where I'm trying to bring this back today is around people who do have a stammer, and what society doesn't see is it's almost like you've got the sort of the end is the person that stammers. But what you don't see underneath that is you don't basically see the root cause. What you see is you see the top layer of somebody that has a stammer, and you see the output. What you see is you see this person who stammers, and you hear the stammer, and you don't necessarily see the person, but you hear that stammer. What you don't then understand, what you don't see, what sits underneath that, is you don't see the anxiety, you don't see the social anxiety, because as much as you are anxious about having a stammer, and I think where this particularly is upsetting for me really is kids, is children. I know what it was like being 7 years old. I remember what it was like being 8, and children are not children are good at masking different things to please you, to please the mum or dad. And this is not a dig up parent, because I'm a parent, but children are very good and they want to please you, and they don't want to impact you, because kids will try to protect their parents. And there are children, and I remember being exactly the same as this, is that the anxiety and the stress that you feel even at 8 years old, and you feel like you've got nowhere else to go, and you're in pain and you're scared, and the fact that children have to go through that, and please don't underestimate this, is that children do go through this. So this is why it's really important, in my opinion, that if you think your child is stressed or anxious, is that you really do speak to them, and that you get them help. So these layers that you don't see, you get these social anxiety in both adults and kids and teenagers. Then obviously then that can lead to other anxiety, that can lead to imposter syndrome, that can lead to depression and mental health. And these are all the layers, and these are all the factors that, when ultimately in society, when we are looking at people who stammer, we are not looking at, we look at trying to tackle the stammer, we look at trying to cure the stammer. I'm of the opinion that we should not be looking to cure stammering. If there is a way to be more fluent, then absolutely fine. But I think we're not tackling the right causes. We are looking to improve the speech without looking at the root causes that sit underneath that. We don't look at looking at the mental health. We're not great at looking at the depression. We're not looking at the anxiety. These are the things that until I was really in a really bad place, and I mean really bad place, to the point where I didn't want to be here anymore, and I opened up myself, and I suffer from it now, because I do, and it's always going to be there. The bipolar is always going to be there. That ultimately is the impact. That's the damage that's been caused to me, not necessarily by the stuttering. That doesn't help, but it's everything else that sits behind that. So I am now. I have to deal with that. But it was only when I started to look at the mental health, when I started to look at the depression, starting to look at how I manage social anxiety, how I started to question stammering. And it's only when there's acceptance. Doesn't mean you've got to accept. There are things to this day that I will never accept. I will never accept that I'm not an imposter. I have to accept, and I have to deal with it, and I have to tackle it and question it, and I have to keep asking questions and keep reminding myself, even if I am. And there are things, just simple things that, it's really difficult to talk, and it's really difficult to say this, but And this is not said because, I'm looking for people for validation. I never look for that. I've never liked myself. And that's not because, I want people to feel sorry for me or because of anything else. You have to learn to like yourself. Whether or not you do, you have to learn to accept yourself. Have to learn to accept the things you are, the way things are. It doesn't mean that you can't improve them. Doesn't mean you should accept without trying to do something else. But you need to accept the way you are right now as a position, and then you need to then learn to either heal and then move on, or you can try to move forward. So acceptance doesn't always have to mean that you accept a place in life. It doesn't always have to mean you accept your lot in life. It just means that you have to, in my opinion, have to kind of accept the situation where you are now, assess it, and then be able to move forward. And that's what it was like for me, being in the darkest place. I don't think I could go any lower, despite having family, children. But if you don't deal with your trauma, if you don't deal with your problem, with depression, with anxiety, they can only do that when you speak, when you talk, and when you accept. Nothing's going to be an overnight fix, but I think it's really, really important to fix your problems, and then you can really start to move on. And that's ultimately not just for people that have a stutter or a stammer. I think this is for most people, but I do think stammerers, I'm obviously have a bias towards people that stammer, because I know how amazing they are. I know how difficult life is. I know how sometimes, you just want a hole to open up, and you just want to fall through that hole. But do you know what? We come back, and we always come back swinging. So that's probably going to be the last live video that I do. I've done a couple. It was an idea that I had, to primarily get stammering out there. My idea was pretty much to kind of get a video out every day on people who stammer, or around mental health, or around that kind of stuff, things that I think are important to me. And that was a great, I say great idea. That was my idea. That was my grand great plan in regards to that, was to get that out there. But I think this is goodbye. I think this is goodbye for these kind of live shows. I just don't think there's an appetite there for it. If there is in the future, and what I would have liked from these shows is to open up a debate, open up on what people's thoughts are on stammering, anxiety. I know it's a really difficult subject to talk about, and I think people who live with whatever they live with every day, and you face your fears, and you're extremely brave. It doesn't really matter what the fear is. I know there are people who live with different things every single day, and it's difficult. It's really hard. So the plan was to open this up and to get people in here and just talk about, and just know that you are supported. Know that not all of society is that way inclined. You do have a place here where you can feel safe, and if anybody comes in that makes you not feel safe, then they will be removed, because this is about an inclusive, safe space for everybody. However, it just hasn't worked out as I planned, and I just want to thank those of you who've watched this. Anybody who's watched the videos in terms of the live stuff, I'm still going to do Stammer on for the time being. But I think as for live shows, I think this is going to be the last one, unless unless there's a call for some more shows, more live shows, which I don't think there will be. But again, that's perfectly fine. So I'm going to sign off and say thank you for those who've watched. It's been an interesting series to do. I have enjoyed it. It's been cathartic for me talking about this kind of stuff. And yeah, just want to thank those of you who watch, those of you who take the time to watch. And now I won't see you on the next one because this is the last one. So thank you. And if you ever want to stop by, I will still be posting videos on Stammer but for these live shows, that's it. So goodbye. Take care of yourselves and have a good one. Take care.